You were not educated to think. You were trained to comply. You were not raised to create value. You were raised to fill roles that already existed. That's why the system doesn't reward creativity. It rewards predictability. And that's why, even in a world full of opportunities, most people feel stuck. Because they were never taught how to think. They were taught what to think. The truth is uncomfortable. You were trained to be replaceable. Every structure of modern life, school, work, even culture, was built on one silent principle. Keep people predictable enough to be controlled, but skilled enough to be useful. It's not a conspiracy, it's design. The education system wasn't created to build innovators. It was created to build obedient workers. In the early 1900s, when factories ruled the economy, schools were modeled after them. Rows, bells, supervisors, memorization, repetition. You weren't supposed to question the lesson. You were supposed to repeat it. You weren't supposed to challenge authority. You were supposed to depend on it. That's why creativity fades as education advances. Because the longer you stay in the system, the more you learn how to fit in instead of stand out. If this already feels like something no one ever told you, pause for a moment and follow rich logic. Because this channel isn't about motivation, it's about deprogramming. By the time you finish school, you've been conditioned to ask for permission for everything, to speak, to move, to rest, to create. So when you enter the job market, you're already trained to behave. You've learned to wait for instructions. You've learned to follow hierarchies. You've learned to trade curiosity for compliance. That's why the system works so efficiently. It doesn't need chains anymore, it just needs habits. The tragedy is that the system doesn't fear ignorance. It fears originality. Because originality is unmanageable. You can't predict it, measure it, or control it. That's why schools rarely teach independence of thought. They teach performance. Grades become the new currency. Conformity becomes the new intelligence. And comparison becomes the new religion. You're told you're only as valuable as your ability to mimic the right answers. But here's the secret. The right answers are designed to keep you in the wrong questions. Then you graduate and the world welcomes you with open arms, into a system that still treats you like a product. You're not paid for your creativity, you're paid for your consistency. They don't buy your mind, they rent your time, and the better you follow orders, the more you're rewarded, until one day, you realize you've mastered the art of being useful but forgettable. That's not success, that's conditioning. The entire job structure is built like a pyramid, not to lift people up, but to filter them down. You're told to work hard so someone else can work smart. You're told to be a team player, which really means don't challenge authority. You're told to climb the ladder without ever asking who built it or what it leads to. And when you finally reach the top, you discover it was leaning against someone else's wall. That's why the most dangerous question in the world is, why? Why is the system built this way? Why does effort seem endless but impact invisible? Why do schools kill curiosity and jobs kill passion? Because the system doesn't need thinkers, it needs operators, machines that can follow logic without rebellion, humans who confuse activity with purpose. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to replace. That's why obedience looks like stability, and questioning looks like rebellion. If this feels too real, like this video and subscribe to Rich Logic. Because the first step to freedom is realizing you were never meant to be free inside this system. You were trained to see risk as danger and security as success. That's why you crave a paycheck more than purpose, why you fear change more than stagnation, why you settle for comfort even when you're dying of potential. Because deep down, you've been programmed to value safety over sovereignty. But safety is an illusion sold by the same system that profits from your predictability. The education system manufactures predictability. The job market monetizes it. It's a perfect loop, a self-sustaining ecosystem of obedience. You spend your youth learning rules. You spend your adulthood enforcing them. You call it maturity, but it's actually surrender. Here's what no one tells you. You were never supposed to fit in. Fitting in means your edges have been shaved off to make you compatible with mediocrity. The system can't handle originality, it can only process it. It doesn't mind dreamers as long as they stay realistic. It doesn't mind thinkers as long as they stay compliant. You were trained to think inside boundaries that feel invisible because they've been painted as normal. When you follow the system too long, you start mistaking permission for purpose. You wait for signs to act. You need approval to start. You chase stability instead of significance. You become replaceable not because you're not skilled, but because your skills are predictable. And predictability is the death of value. The world doesn't pay you for what you know. It pays you for what only you can do. That's why the richest people on earth never chased jobs. They chased leverage. They learned how to turn creativity into systems, not how to survive inside someone else's. They understood something schools never teach. Security doesn't create freedom. Creativity does. Because security is built on fear, and fear creates compliance. Creativity is built on curiosity, and curiosity creates expansion. The irony is, you were born creative. You used to question everything. You used to imagine endlessly. You used to experiment without fear. Then school taught you to raise your hand before speaking, to color inside the lines, to memorize answers you'll never need again. And each time you complied, you killed a small part of your originality. By the time you became an adult, you learned the one lesson the system truly wanted to teach: how to obey quietly. The entire world runs on that principle. Predictable people make predictable profits, and unpredictable thinkers make change. That's why the system doesn't hate rebels. It fears them. Because rebels don't wait for instructions. They build new structures, and every new structure threatens the old one. That's why schools glorify discipline but punish imagination. That's why jobs reward loyalty but limit independence. That's why being a good employee rarely makes you rich. Because the system doesn't want you to rise. It wants you to repeat. The question is, do you want to keep being processed or start creating? Because the difference between an employee and a creator is not intelligence, it's ownership. An employee asks, what should I do next? A creator asks, what can I build next? An employee follows systems. A creator designs them. That's why one is replaceable and the other irreplaceable. You don't need to quit your job to escape the system. You need to quit the mindset that made you dependent on it. You need to stop trading time for validation and start trading creativity for freedom. You need to stop measuring your value by how much you're needed and start measuring it by how hard you are to replace. Because the moment you become irreplaceable, you become ungovernable. Here's the irony. The system pretends to hate rebels, but it secretly depends on them. Because every breakthrough, every revolution, every industry that changed the world came from someone who refused to be processed. Someone who saw the machine and built something bigger than it. You were trained to be replaceable, but you can train yourself to be free, not by escaping society, but by redesigning your role within it, by creating value the system can't replicate, by thinking in ways algorithms can't simulate, by acting from vision, not from validation. Because when you become truly creative, you stop being a product of the system, and the system starts becoming a product of you. So no, you're not broken, you're not lazy, you're not behind. You were just raised to believe that obedience equals intelligence and compliance equals success. But now you know the truth. You were never meant to be a cog. You were meant to be a creator. The system trained you to be replaceable, but it can't replace someone who finally sees the machine.